Okay, so so this is the narration for the shoulder anatomy, and you really want to watch this, listen to this one before you do the anatomy lecture PowerPoint, because you're going to be kind of lost if you don't. This, excuse me. This will also set you up for the quiz, the shoulder anatomy quiz, all that anatomy on the shoulder that you need to know. If you don't know anatomy, you're really going to be lost with a lot of this stuff. You don't want to get the anatomy down and know it well. And it really starts with really knowing this PowerPoint really, really well. Okay, so this part one, just talking about the shoulder bones, shoulder joints, the amazing glenohumeral joint, and some of the shoulder kinematics. Okay, so if we look over the shoulder, you can just follow this around on yourself. If you find your collarbone, go across to your chest, middle of your chest, where it connects to your chest right there, sternoclavicular joint. Keep going over, follow your collarbone over till it hits the acromion in there. That's your AC, acromial clavicular joint. A lot of people separate that. They separate the shoulder, trauma kind of injuries to the shoulder. And this is the glenohumeral joint. The humeral head right here fits into the glenoid fossa. Right in there. Here's the humerus. Scapula we talked about last week. There's that AC joint. SC joint. And the coracoid process. Coracoid process is where the short head of the bicep attaches. A good bony landmark. To find that one, if you come across the clavicle, the collarbone, the clavicle, you come across all the way to it connects again with the acromion and come forward on your shoulder towards the anterior part of your shoulder. It's a big bone that pops right out. And it's a little bit sore. That's the coracoid process where your short head, your bicep sticks out, attaches. And then the glenohumeral joint, it's a ball and socket joint. What does that mean? Look at this guy playing tennis. It just goes everywhere. Your shoulder just moves all over the place. It's an amazing joint that it has such mobility to it. And because it is literally a ball in the socket, the humeral head into that glenoid fossa, it goes all dimensions everywhere. Really helps functionally in that sense, but it makes it very vulnerable to injury. It's vulnerable because it goes everywhere and there's not a lot of support there. It's just kind of laying in that fossa with all the tendons holding it in there. It's also vulnerable to injury because it's a very tight space. And that theme of space and flow continuously through the upper extremity. Here's another good example of it. Tight space in there. If your scapula, as we looked at a little bit last week, is not in the right position, it's going to close off that space, close off the range of motion, lead to impingement, pinching, soreness, pain of all these tendons, all these muscles that are just jammed in there into that joint capsule, that tight space in that joint capsule. So the big thing to get out of that glenohumeral joint, it's highly vulnerable, highly susceptible to injury, and tight space. Here's the kinematics of it again. To me, this graphic here on the left makes a lot of sense when you're trying to figure out what is internal rotation, what is external rotation. You're going to get confused on it if you just think of those positions that we did in 300 in terms of where we manual muscle tested it and how we did the goniometry. To me, the better way to think of it, here's your humerus right here. When you're internally rotating your shoulder, you're basically just spinning the humerus inward, internally, where this arrow goes. When you're doing external rotation, you're basically just spinning the humerus outward, externally. And this really comes into play no matter where the shoulder is. It could be here, 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 wherever. When it's spinning in, It's internal rotation, spinning out external rotation. And it shows you the flexion, extension, and then the abduction is out to the side. Again, it literally just floats around and kind of hangs in there. A little rolling and gliding with this joint. We're going to get into that a little bit when we do some joint mobilization. Play around with the kinematics to get more space in there. Because if we can get more space in there, a lot of times if there's an injury or soreness, it helps reduce the pain and increase the range of motion. So that's kind of what we're doing, joint mobilizations. We're increasing the space, we're kind of pushing it out and stretching it, sort of stuff. And there's this tight joint capsule around here. The bursa, look up shoulder bursitis in a minute. In the shoulder PowerPoint lecture. See again, it's a tight space. It's supposed to be like a little cushion, floaty little bag in there. Commonly becomes irritated because of the tight space and poor posture, poor kinematics, leads to irritation, swelling, that sort of thing. You could think of, when you think of work and ergonomics, the dysfunctional movement pattern. When you have poor posture, it sets up a DMP, which leads to pain. A lot of times it's impingement, shoulder bursitis. Okay, so that's the end of part